Get that positioned. Make sure that that is spotlighted, and let's get the text up and running. There we go. Oh, clicking wrong buttons. Okay. You know, 1 week off, and all of a sudden, all the things I have been doing for years get forgotten. All right. I think that is everything in place as it needs to be. And I am glad to be back together so that we can do some more studying of our Torah together. I hope everybody had a, there we go. Hope everybody had a wonderful Pesach and is looking forward for the continuation of the regular Parshiot. We are going to be picking up here in Leviticus 11. This is Parashat Shemini. And this Torah portion has many fascinating elements, some that you might be familiar with, such as the rules regarding kashrut and many of its details. Some that are maybe are less familiar, like the section we'll be looking at regarding some of the issues of ritual purity. Now, this is going to feel very strange. As we've talked about in many other classes, the concept of tuma, of ritual purity, is not one that a modern person is viscerally connected to. We are going to talk a lot about why we should still be studying this and what a benefit it has to us. But I just want to preface by saying, I get that this is not going to feel like the most relevant section. When we study love your neighbor as yourself, everybody's eyes light up, and you can see the connection being made quite easily. When we talk about the creepy crawlies that cause ritual impurity in various ways, I can see eyes begin to glaze over. And we're going to talk a little bit more in the commentary about why that happens. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we work against that, how we overcome that tendency. There are different techniques needed for approaching this with a spiritual mindset than approaching other sections of Torah. But with that as our preface, let's go ahead and get down to work. We're going to begin here in chapter 11, and we are on verse 29. Now, these are for you, the ones tameh. Tameh, again, is ritual impurity. And one of the things I love about Fox's translation is that some words he doesn't even bother trying to translate, because ritual impurity or impurity just have a whole host of other connotations and a train of baggage within the English language. So we're going to, by and large, try to use the words tameh and tahor, ritually impure and ritually pure, rather than the English translation. So I'll slip back and forth occasionally just to make sure that we're all still holding on to the same ideas, but let's stick with tameh as much as possible. Now, these are for you, the ones tameh among the swarming creatures. The sheretz is a particular type of creature noted for that swarm on the earth. So these are the swarming things. You might call these in English, as one of my teachers did, creepy crawlies. The weasel, the mouse, the great lizard after its kind, meaning and its varieties, the gecko, the monitor, and the lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. Many of these translations are a little iffy because the precise taxonomy of all biblical animals is open to some debate. We know we're in the right vicinity based upon their usage in other parts of Tanakh, as well as in other parts of ancient halakha. But if we were to go to a biologist and work on this, we might put a little wiggle room in, because after all, the taxonomy of modern biology is, well, modern. And as such, the terminology does not align one-to-one to the way our ancestors would have referred to these creatures around them. Natan Slifkin, wonderful rabbi in Israel who runs the Biblical Museum, has done many books on the animals of the Bible. And of course, these sections are heavily covered. But that's not our focus for today. What do we need to know about the impurity that comes from the creepy crawlies? These are the ones tameh for you among all the swarming creatures. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be tameh until sunset. So you touch the body of one of those creatures, and now you are tameh. And that impurity lasts until sunset. Anything upon which one of them should fall when they are dead shall be tameh, whether any vessel of wood or cloth or skin or sackcloth, any vessel that can be used in work. It is to be put through water. It remains tameh until sunset, and then it is pure. So this tuma, this impurity, attaches itself to these objects, and then with water and time, it will eventually revert to being tahor, to being ritually pure. And regarding any earthen vessel, this is sort of the terracotta style pottery, into which one of them falls within it, everything within it shall be tameh, and you are to break it. So earthenware vessels are considered especially porous to the point of never being able to properly expel any tum'ah, and therefore, once it has become ritually impure, it is permanently ritually impure until broken. As for any food that might be eaten, should water come in and it come in contact with it, it shall be tameh. And any beverage that might be drunk, if in any vessel, it shall be tameh. This doesn't mean that water on food automatically makes it something that is tameh. This instead means that once food has come into contact with water, then it is now susceptible to tum'ah. It could become tameh. And this is important in the ancient agricultural system. 35. Anything else on which their carcass falls shall be tameh. An oven or a two-pot stove is to be demolished. They are tameh. They shall remain tameh for you. Now, we're not going to go into all of the ins and outs of what happens with these demolished items, although I will point out that Tanur Shel Achnai, one of the most famous sections from the Talmud, which deals with a tanur, an oven that has been reconstituted in order to navigate these ritual laws, is a fascinating read. But just for the moment, understand that the bodies of these animals will render other objects ritually impure if they come into contact with them. However, a spring or cistern for gathering waters shall remain pure, but one who touches their carcass shall be tameh. So if a mouse falls into the well, the entire well does not become ritually impure, but instead, if you pull out the mouse, you are tameh, but the waters from the well are not considered to be impure. Now, if part of their carcass falls upon any sowing seed that is to be sown, it remains pure. But if water is put on the seed and part of their carcass falls on it, it is tameh for you. So again, like we mentioned earlier, once water has been introduced, then there is susceptibility to this tum'ah, this ritual impurity. But if water has not been introduced, then the item is not susceptible and thus will remain pure, even though it has come into contact. Now, let me just take care of that. Now, at this point, I'm sure you are thinking, what a load of interesting topics, Rabbi. Thank you for sharing what is obviously the most important things we need to know in the 21st century. Well, yes, it is still very important to know, and I'm going to beg your indulgence as we finish off this chapter that indeed all of this topic is actually quite not merely interesting in an academic way, but interesting in what it can reveal about our general approach to the spirituality of Jewish law, Jewish practice, and Torah as a whole. So bear with me a little bit more. If there should die one of the animals that are permitted to you for eating, so let's say a cow, a sheep, regular animal, one who touches its carcass shall remain tameh until sunset. Now, wait a minute. I thought that those were permitted animals, but why am I becoming rendered tameh from touching it? Well, because it is dead, and therefore this tum'ah becomes an issue. And one who eats from its carcass is to scrub his garments and remain tameh until sunset. and one who carries its carcass is to scrub his garments and remain tameh until sunset. So this tum'ah, this impurity, lasts until sunset after the proper ablutions have taken place. 43, any swarming creature that swarms upon the earth, it is a detestable thing. It is not to be eaten. Anything going about on its belly, anything going about on all fours, up to anything with many legs, among all the swarming creatures that swarm upon the earth, you are not to eat them, for they are detestable things. All right, this is just nasty. This is, term of sheketz is just recognizing that it is a foul kind of thing to be around. Do not make yourselves detestable through any swarming thing that swarms. You are not to make yourself tameh through them, and so become tameh through them. For I am Adonai your God. You are to hallow yourselves and be holy, for holy am I. You are not to make yourself tameh through any swarming creature that crawls about upon the earth. For I am Adonai, the one bringing you up from the land of Egypt, to be God to you. You are to be holy, for I am holy. This instruction regarding animals, birds, and living beings that stir in the water, all beings that swarm upon the earth, that there may be separation between the tameh and the pure, or the tahor, between the living creatures that may be eaten and the living creatures that you are not to eat. All right, so at the end here, we get a rather startling degree of self-awareness, that it is as though God himself is recognizing that this conversation regarding tameh and tahor, of what is pure and what is impure, is maybe not exciting everybody. And that this food legislation, this purity legislation, is maybe not making people feel the connection that God wants. And so God is going to spell it out. Look, by keeping these rules regarding what is pure and impure, you are acculturating yourself towards paths of holiness. And that is essential, because I brought you out to be my people, and as my people, you are meant to be holy. And all of this Torah, all of this instruction, is designed to play a part in that process. And if you were to think, well, I'll be holy on Shabbat, or I'll be holy when I'm giving tzedakah, but the rest of this doesn't really matter, forget that. The rest of this does, in fact, matter. Now, with that in mind, let's go take a look at why we should actually appreciate that this matters, because I will tell you off the top of my head, off the top of our conversation, that most of what we just read is not a significant element in modern daily Jewish living. So not only was it difficult for our ancestors in the ancient world to appreciate the elements that were being discussed, it is absolutely understandable that in the modern world, where we are not even bound by most of these topics, because of reasons that we'll discuss in just a moment, that we also would find it a almost alienating topic. But as such, that just means we need a little different direction in our struggle with the text in order to properly understand it in a way that will not only make sense within its context, but make sense within our context in the modern world. So let's go ahead and dive in to our commentary. And I am, as I do from time to time, but quite unusually, we are drawing from Sefer HaChinuch exclusively. I believe that his summary of this topic is one that is excellent for the modern reader. And we'll talk about some of the other issues in it. So it won't be only his voice, but it is going to be only his text throughout the entirety of it. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Sefer HaChinuch, this is a wonderful collection from the Middle Ages that goes through Torah portion by Torah portion, mitzvah by mitzvah, putting a broad understanding of many of the points of the observance of a particular commandment, as well as some of the underlying themes behind that commandment. And as we're going to see, well, the themes regarding these commandments are ones that need special attention. So let's go ahead and begin with his words. From the roots of the commandment, we need to preface that anyone who has intelligence will not have a doubt that there was never a man that grasped to know all wisdom to its end, that nothing of it be hidden from him. I apologize for the clunky translation of the medieval Hebrew, but what he is trying to say here is that if you are smart, you know you don't know everything. And indeed, this has been proven 100 times over with the invention of the internet, where the loudest, most confident voices are usually those from the biggest fools. But what we have seen historically is that to have wisdom is to understand the limits of one's understanding, and that no matter how smart a person has become, that person will always know that there is something that he or she still does not know. No one ever claims to know it all. That's going to be a very important foundation for where he goes next. As even about our teacher Moshe, meaning Moses the prophet, peace be upon him, they, may their memory be blessed, said, here in the Talmud, there are 50 gates of understanding, and they were all given over to Moshe except for one. Even Moses, who had the deepest level of understanding of anyone, is understood by our tradition to have still been missing 1/50th of the potential understanding, that even he did not have perfect understanding. And likewise, the wise King Shlomo, King Solomon, said about himself in Ecclesiastes, I said, I will be wise, but it is distant from me. Even with his wisdom and his efforts, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, did not know everything. And also, anyone with a brain in his skull will not have a doubt that God, may he be blessed, is the father of wisdom, and it is from him. It comes out that it is all included in him. All right, so part 2 of our understanding, God is the source of all wisdom and understanding. After all, it is God that created the universe that we seek to understand. And there is also not any doubt that the Father of all good would command something to his creatures for their good and for their benefit, and to distance any injury from them. Principle number 3 is that what God has commanded is being done for the good of the person being commanded. That's us. When we're talking about Torah commandments, at least, we're talking about the Jewish people. So we have this basic set of principles. 1, no matter how smart you are, you don't know everything. 2, God does know everything because, after all, everything flows out of God. Therefore, it is understood by God. 3, that means when God commands, God is not making mistakes. God is not making commandments based upon erroneous assumptions. God is not making commandments with gaps in them. God is instead making commandments that are perfectly wise and will be done for the good of those who have received them. Okay, and therefore, when we grasp some of the commandments with our wisdom, to know the benefit that accrues to us from them, we shall rejoice about it. Sometimes we, because we're not complete fools, will be able to figure out the benefit of having different commandments for us in our lives. And we will understand God's wisdom sometimes quite easily. Don't murder is not too hard in its broadest sense to understand the benefit that comes for all of us when we have that as a commandment within our community. But when we do not grasp the benefit to us from them, with our wisdom, we must nonetheless think that with the extra wisdom that God, may he be blessed, has over every creature, he knows the benefit to us in that commandment. And therefore, he commanded us about it. So even if we cannot understand the reason behind each of the commandments, that is to say, the benefit that comes to us from each commandment, say, for example, the benefit that we would get from all of the purity legislation, we still have to say, yes, but God only commands for our good, and God's commands are based upon God's perfect wisdom, and therefore there is a good to be gained by the observance of these commandments, even if I don't understand the benefit that is coming to me from them. After all, if it wasn't going to be beneficial, God wouldn't have made it a commandment. All right, so that would be enough in general to just simply say, sometimes you're going to shrug and say, God knows best. And that's very nice. It fits easily on a t-shirt, but we want a little bit more. And our tradition has told us that we need more, that the sort of cliche, just have faith, is not actually where we are meant to go, that we are meant to push the limits of our understanding, and we are meant to push the limits of our depth of our connection to God through inquiry, not through blind acceptance. So we get, well, almost 2 more pages worth of discussion on this. And they, may their memory be blessed, meaning the Chachamim, the sages of antiquity, already informed us, here in the Talmud again, why we do not know the reason for all the commandments. And they said that the thing is that it not become a stumbling block for us. All right, so not surprisingly, but surprisingly written down, our ancestors also asked the same questions that I'm sure many of you are asking as well, which is, okay, I get that God is smarter than all of us, and God knows why God's doing what God does, and we don't. But couldn't God have told us? I mean, okay, we can't figure it out, but we might be able to understand if God laid it out, if God gave us the information. So why not? Well, because to give a reason for all of the commandments could actually become a stumbling block. What does that mean? How would we possibly be worse off if we had a reason behind each commandment explained to us? And they brought a proof, as behold, the reason for 3 of them was revealed, and a great man of the world stumbled upon them. So you can go read the whole story in Sanhedrin 21b, but in that context, it was a person who was trying to understand what was happening in front of him, tragedy in front of him, and he was using the "you will do this so that your days will be long" explanation within the Torah, and when it was not working out the way he expected, that made him come to doubt the entirety of not just Judaism, but God and everything that he knew. So even though, or rather, because those reasons were laid out in that particular moment, they ended up undermining someone's faith rather than reinforcing it. So we might imagine that we would all feel better if we had a perfectly enumerated list of all the benefits and reasons for each commandment. But even for those commandments for which we do have reasons that are laid out quite explicitly, we still are capable of stumbling over them, sometimes precisely because it looks like it's been laid out so clearly. So, as it is said, let not a quibbler think to come against me with the metaphor that they, may their memory be blessed, said, the spoon carved by the carpenter will burn his mouth with mustard, about that which I said now, that God, may he be blessed, hid the reasons for the commandments for us, and yet I have raised my hand to speak about them to my youth. So the author wants to say, look, now, I know I just told you that don't expect God to tell us all the reasons for all the commandments, and that if we did have the reasons, they might make us trip and stumble, like we have the example. And I know, dear reader, that you've read up to this point in my work, and all the way up here through the previous 150 some commandments, I've given you reasons behind all the commandments and benefits that come from the observance of the different commandments. So aren't I being hoisted on my own petard? That's the spoon carved by the carpenter idiom basically means that. Haven't I already hurt myself, my argument, haven't I undercut my argument by already spending hundreds of pages doing exactly what I just said God wouldn't do for us? And doesn't that make me not just a hypocrite, but also somebody that's committing harm because I'm creating stumbling blocks by giving them the reasons? Well, as my teachers have already preceded me to speak several things about them in the Midrashim and in other places, by way of their simple understanding and the depth of their wisdom, the strength of their understanding, and their great holiness is stored in them, and even all the winds of the world cannot move them. So, yes, you've got it right, Mr. Quibbler, that maybe this is an issue, but understand that what I am revealing is only that which has already been part of our tradition and custom since time immemorial. I am not uncovering new things. I am simply relaying what is already shared wisdom. And that wisdom is solid, and that wisdom has great holiness in it, and therefore it probably won't hurt us. Now, there are others that continue to debate about this. There are many who consider this work, as well as other works of Rambam, that that go into great reasons for different commandments as being problematic for exactly this reason, that we are supposed to observe the commandments, and if we try to understand them, it's just going to trip us up. So better not even to try. So this is a continual point of contention. I happen to be in the camp that says we should always have humility when it comes to our ability to ascertain reasons and blessings that come from commandments. But that doesn't mean that we should not engage in the pursuit. We should understand that our conclusions are not infallible, and that our conclusions are not something that should ever be built upon to uproot our belief in God or our belief in what is right. But the exercise of trying to find them, of trying to investigate those meanings, is always a worthwhile endeavor, as long as we keep that humility in mind. So, as we continue here, and regarding anyone who is able to deepen counsel and their simple understanding, because he longs to peer through the lattice, meaning to penetrate into the deeper understanding, to delight in the splendor of their vision, meaning of the sages, and to gather from their leaves, to gird himself with them, it is not fit to place blame upon him, but to bless him and to mention him for praise in the place that he is there. So he is trying to say, look, if somebody is really trying to push themselves to understand more deeply Torah and God, we can't blame them for that. That is what a person who is dedicated to God is going to do. They are going to try and peer more and more deeply into the mysteries. Again, as long as you have humility and as long as you are willing to hear difference of opinion, then you are usually going to be safe. It's arrogance that usually leads us to the worst outcomes in this case. Now, he hasn't even talked about purity yet. What happened? I thought we were talking about things that were pure and impure. Well, this has all been a preface, and after I take a drink, I'll get down to the job at hand. But you should know by the fact that he chose to put this preface here in this particular portion of his explanation of the Torah, rather than a different place, is that he is very conscious that trying to probe the mysteries of the issues of purity is the kind of thing that can lead a person to very, very wrong conclusions. So with that in mind, we will explore his attempt, but with not only humility of our own, but also with a little vicarious humility for him, and recognize that his interpretation need not be definitive, and even if our understanding of his interpretation was. So after this preface, that the wisdom of God is greater than all wisdom, and that he only commands a thing for our good and for our great benefit, we have no difficulty or question in all of the prohibitions of food and distancing of impurity, in everything that the benefit to us is not known and graspable by investigation. As we truly know, it is all for good. So he starts off with a general statement. Look, even stuff we don't understand, we still understand it must be for good, because this is God. God's wisdom is perfect. God acts for our benefit. Therefore, as God commands, it must be for our benefit and for good and based on wisdom. However, and do not wonder, my son, about the matters of impurity. It is very hidden from every creature. So he's going to start off with this general statement, which is, we don't know. At the issue of tumah, of ritual impurity, we don't know really what's going on here. This is not the same as, knowing how wheat grows. This is not the same as knowing why the rain falls. This is something that is not does not open itself to our penetrative inquiry in the manner of the rest of the natural world. And as such, we are going to have to proceed with a great deal of caution and humility. But do understand that it is for good, since God commanded it, but that it is not a simple matter at all. This is a different category altogether than the vast majority of the other mitzvot, which do not deal with these topics. Okay. And do not wonder, sorry, I read that sentence. So it is, if it is very hidden from every creature, right? So this is, something that is mysterious, but he is going to advance a possibility. As it is possible that impurity injures the soul and makes it a little sick. All right, so he is going to suggest here that ritual impurity may have a negative effect upon our spirit. And in whatever way we can say a spirit has become ill, ritual impurity might cause that to happen. Now, for some of you, that may sound perfectly reasonable. I mean, after all, if it's a issue of ritual impurity, which is connected to spiritual matters, then why wouldn't it make the soul sick? However, there are many other sages and authorities that say, no, there is nothing in and of itself with regards to ritual impurity that causes in and of itself a negative effect. It is how it interacts with our relationship in other actions and other activities. Namely, of course, ritual impurity's primary effect was to make it so that we would be delayed in our connection to God through the ritual acts of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and then later the temple. That somebody who was ritually impure could not participate in or eat of a ritual sacrifice. So there are many other sages that argue that that is the negative part of the whole impurity, and that this give and take of purity and impurity is simply about regulating our access or our need for a reset when it comes to our connection to God through the altar-based activities, but that there is no actual damage being done other than delays. And the argument, of course, for that is the fact that there are many acts of ritual impurity that are unavoidable, and there are, in fact, some acts of ritual impurity that are required. That is to say that we have to become ritually impure. For example, most famously, when we take care of the needs of somebody who is deceased, we have to attend to the body in order to pay the person proper respect and to give a proper burial. And yet that is one of the chief forms of ritual impurity that we are told to be concerned with. Well, obviously, if it was causing injury to us, well, that would be a problem. Now, being sick can also mean just a temporary or a moment of readjustment. So we don't have to take this as being anything like a permanent injury, but it could be more of like the headache you get when you put on the wrong pair of glasses to remind you to get better glasses. It's not a permanent status. It is simply a symptom of a moment that you are experiencing that is calling attention to something. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and continue with his theory, his hypothesis that this is something to do with sickness. And it is similar to that which they, may their memory be blessed, said in Yoma, in the Talmud, and thus become impure. Venit metem, right? Become impure through them. This is from Leviticus 11:43, where we just were. It is written, that is to say, spelled, and you shall become foolish. Nit amtem. Right now, this is a classic rabbinic wordplay where you have the same letters or nearly the same, and with a shifting of the vocalization of the vowels, you can come to a different idea. Meaning to say that the springs of the intellect, which is the living soul, is spoiled a little with the matter of impurity. So his interpretation of this is that when a person becomes ritually impure, that this has a negative effect on our intellect. And intellect, I point to my head as a good modern person from the 21st century, but of course they would have pointed to their entire self as being the seat of the me. It's not just a mind thing like we think of intellect. It is a whole body experience of yourself, and your passions, your intellect is all considered one. Whole nother conversation. So in his mind, ritual impurity would somehow blunt that self and therefore would need some level of remediation, the cleaning, the time delay, etc., before we go back to the altar where we are expected to be of perfect clarity of self and purpose. And do not wonder about the intellect being spoiled with physical things, even though that is not its type. So with regards to the sort of dualism that was a deep understanding in the ancient world, where the soul is a fundamentally different thing than the physical body, don't be worried, rather, that the fact that a soul can be disrupted by the contact with a physical thing, the body of one of those creatures or other aspects within Torah, even though it's not the same, physical versus non-physical. As due to the partnership of the soul with the body, such occurs to it regardless. That is the unique combination of existence that we have, that our soul and our body are bound together in a way that each influences the other. And as such, when something comes into contact with our body, carrying the carcass of one of these animals, then we will have a spiritual disruption. And if so, we, the sons of man, good old humanity, in the poverty of our intelligence, do not know the soul and its nature. And if I'm right, because again, he recognizes with great humility that this is but one approach to this topic, that we still are not 100% sure how the soul and our body and everything else work. That we don't have the math on this. We don't have the test results back. We have guidance from our ancestors. We have insights from Tanakh, but ultimately, we do have to recognize that there are elements here that we simply have not been able to penetrate yet. And so how are we to tire ourselves to know its healing or sicknesses by way of investigation? Right? How do we proceed then? Because we want to make sure that our spirit is healthy. We want to make sure our spirit recovers. How do we investigate that? Is it not that there can be no strategy for physicians in healing until they know the essence of the sickness? In medicine, you have to do research to figure out how to cure. You don't just throw pills at people. And therefore, regarding all the distancings of impurity that are in the Torah, we should not dig for their roots until we come to complete knowledge of the matters of the soul, to know its nature, where it comes from, and where it is going, and to understand this and know it, as in it there is a bit of an answer to all the roots of the commandments of purity and impurity. This is the case to the point that there is like a veil over our faces regarding the novelty of the red heifer that renders the pure impure. The person who prepares it becomes ritually impure to a degree afterwards, but purifies the impure. The person who benefits from it has the most serious form of ritual impurity removed from them. And there too will we write at length about the matter, with God's help, so as to receive reward for the effort to find desirable words. Meaning, go look there in the mitzvot about the red heifer, and you'll see his thoughts on this topic in more detail. And of course, God will reward our efforts as we try to unravel all of this. Now, with all of that in mind, he then comes back and says, and it, meaning the laws of purity, is practiced in every place and at all times by males and females, meaning this is a law for all of us, regarding that anyone who is rendered impure by swarming creatures is called impure, and does not emerge from his impurity until he immerses in water like his law, meaning according to the various degrees and rituals that are laid out, not just in this Torah portion, but elsewhere as well. And nonetheless, now that, on account of our iniquities, we do not have a temple nor pure objects, we should not count it in the tally of commandments practiced. So he is saying very clearly, we don't actually follow these mitzvot at the moment because there is no temple, there is no altar, there are no sacrifices, and there are no sanctified items that are around. I know that we treat the Torah in a sacred manner, and that is absolutely right and desirable, but the Torah is not the Ark of the Covenant. The Torah is not the altar of Jerusalem. Its physical sanctity is of a very different sort. The Ark, the altar, there were rules regarding their purity and what would happen or what would be the degrees of violation were one who was ritually impure to come into contact with them, that are very explicit. The Torah, no, not the same way. And as such, we have to recognize that at the moment we are living in a world where these commandments are not practiced, not because we are negligent, but because there is nothing about which we can practice them. How can I make sure I am pure before going to the altar when there's no altar? And how can I, according to Jewish law, make myself pure even when I know that the moment I step out of the mikveh, I am in an impure state in the current state of our world? So we are not really using these mitzvot. And for those that try to write lists of commandments that are still being practiced up till this day, this doesn't make the list. But why are we studying it? Well, let's go ahead and continue to read. And anyone who is rendered impure, and even on purpose, remembering that there are many times when we need to be made impure on purpose, most notably for burying the dead, at any time, does not have a sin with this, but rather he is not permitted to touch consecrated things until he becomes pure. So, yes, we still have this technically on the books that a person does become impure, and whether it's by accident, dead mouse falls on your head, or whether it is on purpose because you are burying somebody with great compassion and care, in either event, you're not sinning, because there is not a sin to be committed in this point, that the sin is to not approach the altar or other holy objects, not to remain constantly pure. And that is a very important reason why I hate using the term purity and impurity in the English. Because in English, everybody wants to be pure all the time. Because in English, pure is a better state to be in. I want pure water. I want my food to be pure. I want everything to be pure. Why would I want it to be contaminated with something else? But in Jewish law, to be pure or impure is simply a state that you are in at different times. And it is not a automatic blessing to be pure, and in fact can be a sin if you should render yourself ritually impure in order to bury someone. And likewise, being impure is not a sin, because there are numerous times where that is exactly the state that we should be in, given the circumstances we have found ourselves in. So we have to disconnect the concept of pure and impure, of tameh and tahor, from the concept of being of sinning or not sinning. But these are completely different axes upon which we live. And if we can do that, then we will have a clearer path to understand that studying the questions regarding purity and impurity is not about protecting ourselves from sin. It is about trying to protect and rebalance our souls at moments of disruption. When we come into contact with the dead, we are often disrupted. We are unnerved. It is something that will shake us to different degrees. And whether we want to admit that or not, some people try to pretend like it doesn't affect them, but it should. When we have recognized that disruption, then we need a period in order to resettle ourselves and refocus. If we denied that disruption, then we would not go to we would not make any attempt to rebalance ourselves. And if we acted like that disruption was a sin, then we would be missing the point altogether. Because now we are saying that it is wrong to have come into contact in that sense, when oftentimes it is not merely desirable, but even commanded. So purity and impurity are not great words. But nonetheless, anyone who understands should distance impurity as the soul is elevated with purity. It may not be a sin, it may be sometimes required, but we should still orient ourselves in the world using this as part of our compass kit, as part of our navigational tools. That while there are definite times when we need to turn left into something that is tameh, we should still remember that we need to find our way back to becoming tahor, to becoming ritually pure later on. That these are signposts in our relationship with God and our relationship with the world around us, and that we have to use those signposts correctly, not as indications of sin, not as indications of worth, but recognizing that by continuing to overcome the disruption that comes from moments of things that are tameh, things that are ritually impure, that we are able to elevate ourselves more. This is a completely different strategy for our spiritual life than our normal and still important distancing ourselves from transgressions and sins, but they are not identical. Right? This is completely separate in its own way. Like I said before, what we do when we are ritually impure in the ancient world, when the temple stood, etc., could lead to transgressions, but the very act of being ritually impure was not in and of itself a sin. So try to explore not just this Torah portion, but much of the rest of the book of Leviticus with that in mind. What is this saying about what can disrupt a life? What can introduce into ourselves an element of confusion, an element of bewilderment, especially about our relationship to God or to each other? And then what can I do to help rebalance that and reestablish myself in a better way? With that in mind, we will wrap up for today. I am sure that we'll be continuing this conversation either individually or as a group at a later time. Take care, everyone, and be well.